Now, those celebrations come amid a mixed picture in Africa. The continent is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world, yet poverty and inequality still dog many neighborhoods. The continent is also recording more regular elections, but real freedom is still far away. KTN's Ageyo now takes a closer look at the state of the continent 5 decades on.
Structure that is the African Union headquarters plays host to tens of African heads of state and government.
But this way crowded, so we go another way.
It is an all too familiar sight for Kadus Tasfai, a taxi driver in Addis Ababa.
The problem is everything is done by groups, not all by peoples.
By that he means that such meetings are exclusive clubs which do not necessarily represent what the ordinary African wants. A deep reflection shared by other analysts on the continent.
In many places we have a modern or near modern constitution. We have an array of institutions, from judiciaries to anti-corruption bodies to human rights bodies and so on. But in a lot of the places we still have elite capture of those institutions. So we just have paper democracy and not real democracy.
Yet the story of Africa is not all doom and gloom. For instance, at least 6 out of 10 fastest growing economies in the world in the last 10 years are in Africa. The continent now has more regular elections. And according to some analysts,
this is no longer dictated by Westerners. This is no longer dictated by external, but it's coming from African really looking at their own problem with their own perspective.
People tend to talk negatively about the situation in Africa, but I think Africans have come a long way. We've gone through periods of democracy, authoritarian rule, and we're moving again to, through another democratic period.
Yet such images still scar the surface of the continent in places such as Mali and the DRC. And the much talked about Africa's rise is still plagued by lopsided economic policies that rob the continent of billions of dollars each year.
The way in which we plan our economies needs to respond to, for instance, the issue of unemployment. That's a big one. I think it's across the board. Most African countries need to deal with unemployment. And how do you deal with it? You cannot continue importing. You cannot continue exporting raw materials. You have to add value in a way that then can create jobs. You have to think about monies that leave the continent, illicit capital flight, tax evasion.
Then there is a question of inclusion of all sectors of society in key decision-making organs.
It's not sufficient that we have 2 women presidents. People celebrate and say, yes, we have made progress, but it's not sufficient. I think we still need to have women in the spaces of decision-making.
The 50th anniversary also comes amid growing concern over basic freedoms in a number of countries, such as the recent raid on the Monitor newspaper in Uganda.
If you're going to clamp down on the media in the kind of way that we've seen in Uganda, then citizens have a reason to be afraid, because then you lose the voice, you lose the channels with which you can speak and have your leaders listen to you and articulate your issues.
Still, the party will go on here in Addis, because all is not lost.
The challenge here is how we will move to implement all those beautiful things we have in the Constitutive Act of the African Union.
I think the first thing that they should be doing is to reflect on what they've done in 50 years.
People are asking the question, for instance, how many African countries actually require visas to come into Addis to attend the AU summit? You'll be surprised. It's almost every other country. So what does that say about the freedom of African citizens to move across and around the continent?
And Tasfai sums it up in one word: unity.
When we are Africans, unity, we can solve the problems simply.
A fitting prescription as Africa embarks on the road to the next 50 years. Exactly 50 years ago, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, now renamed the African Union, was established right here in the Ethiopian capital. 5 decades later, a lot has changed on the continent, but many of the aspirations of those founding fathers remain alive today. And the onus is now on the current generation of leaders to turn them into reality. Ageyo, KTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
KTN's Ageyo there taking a closer look at the state.